A lot of these big kibble corporations and manufacturers, they don't really care a whole lot what's going into the food, unfortunately.
She said the pet food industry is telling us what to feed our pets based on what they want to sell us more than what's good for the dog.
Yeah, a lot of it is the same food and ingredients that goes into our food, which is... Welcome back, everybody, to episode 21 of the Clean Kitchen Podcast. I'm Kyle.
I'm Kevin.
And today we are going to be talking about a very highly requested podcast episode topic, and that is dog food.
Whew.
But specifically, we're going to talk about 4 things that every single dog owner out there should know. The first thing we're going to talk about is when dog food actually started, and it actually wasn't that long ago. We're going to be talking about dog food requirements, and I think that section of the podcast is going to shock a lot of people. And then we're going to be talking about how we really got convinced that we need dog food in the first place and that we shouldn't be feeding our dogs just normal human food. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to be talking about an ancestral appropriate diet for dogs. What are dogs actually supposed to be eating? And with that, we will recommend the not so good types of dog food out there, and then the better, and then of course the best types of dog food, what we recommend you should be feeding your dogs. But let's start off here. Kevin, when did dog food actually start?
Yeah, it's important to get on the same page here. So we're going to travel back in time a little bit to understand what America was like in the early 1900s. And if we go back in time, all the way back to the early 1900s, what we'll find out is that about 40% of the U.S. population lived on a farm. And on a farm, you have a bunch of animals with you, of course.
Yep.
And it was common to find dogs on the farm helping out. They were herding cattle, herding sheep. They were being active.
Yes.
But
playing roles in the farm.
Exactly. They had a role. They were doing something.
Yeah.
They had a job. And over time, people started to transition from living on a farm to living in big cities.
Yes.
And because of that, people were adopting dogs for companionship and not necessarily to do a job, to work on the farm. Today, actually, only about 1% of the U.S. population lives on a farm. So a drastic decrease from that 40% that we saw in the early 1900s. Mm-hmm. At this same time, there was a livestock feed company called Purina. You may have heard of them.
I've heard of them.
Yes. And in the early 1900s, they started to notice that sales were down. People were moving away from farms and moving towards those cities like we talked about. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't buying as much livestock feed as they previously were. Mm-hmm. And so they had an idea. They'll take all this livestock feed that they had been making for pigs and sheep and cattle, and they'll just transition it to dogs and have people in these cities just buy the dog food now.
Yep.
So that was something that was crazy that happened.
So what I'm hearing you say is Purina, they were a livestock feed company first, not a dog food company.
For 30 years first.
Gotcha.
But
many people today know them as a dog and cat food company.
Exactly.
I guess.
Yep.
So, okay. So there was this transition from less dogs on the farm, more dogs in the household. Mm-hmm. And with that, less livestock, so there was less feed going to these farms, and Purina wanted to figure out what they could do with all this leftover feed that they were doing, that they had. So I'll pick up from where you left off here. So they pivoted from livestock feed to dog feed, and they had a lot of things going for them here because they could market it as cheap to feed their dogs, easy to distribute. It was very convenient to feed the dog because you just, open the pack, take it out, put it in their food, and a very long shelf life. Some of this food lasted for a number of years, so it didn't go bad.
Yep. Yeah, and that first kind of round of Purina dog food came out in 1926, and you mentioned hasn't been around that long. It's been less than 100 years since the first real dog food, Purina, came out with their food in 1926.
And before that, it seems like dogs were really just given table scraps or, whatever was left over from dinner, they were just given that. Dog food wasn't really a thing before 1926.
Right. So we talk a lot about the ingredients that are in our food. Mm-hmm. Almost every day we talk about that and what it really means. So we want to also look at what ingredients are in dog food. Are they getting some of these oils that is in our food, or what are they getting?
Yeah.
That's in there. And so tell me a little bit about what the regulation looks like for dog food.
We interrupt this podcast to announce that we have picked the 10 lucky winners of the giveaway $50 gift card to Whole Foods. You will be receiving a direct message from me on Instagram today, and we will also leave the 10 lucky winners in the description of this podcast episode. Again, thank you for everyone that left a review. We will definitely do something like this again in the future. And for those that haven't left a rating or review yet, please go ahead and leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed on YouTube. So in the US, the food regulations for dog food are actually the same as the regulations for livestock feed. So basically all that to say, the US doesn't really care what's going in dog food.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of strict regulations. If you look up the official definition, pets are actually considered companion animals, and that means they're considered property. In the eyes of the law, that is. So a dog owner, if something happens to your dog and you want to, for example, sue a food company, you're really only able to recover the cost of the pet, like how much it costed to purchase that pet, and any vet bills. So not a lot of money.
Right. Is not a lot of incentives for dog food companies to get things done right, because if they mess up,
it's not a big deal.
They get a little slap on the wrist.
Exactly.
Yep.
One video I watched, which was kind of sad, but it compared, if you've had a dog for 12 years and then all of a sudden it gets sick, and maybe it's because, a certain food that you gave them, and you try to sue that company that made the manufacturer that made the dog food, it's basically like, it's the same as, it's treated as property. So that 12-year-old dog is basically the same as a 12-year-old chair that you have in your house.
Yeah, it's really sad that's the analogy. I actually was watching another documentary, and there was one individual that he's devoted his life to determine the value of dogs in this specific context. And he's got this crazy complex formula. I don't think it's gained too much traction, but there's things in the work to maybe get a better value as compared to just the cost of the dog.
Yeah, because we're emotionally attached to them.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Yep. For context too, for humans, which is kind of crazy, the common price that you see when things do go wrong and a company gets sued is about $6 to $9 million. So companies are heavily incentivized to not mess up here.
For humans.
And that doesn't exist for dogs.
Gotcha.
But it's really sad either way.
Doesn't seem like they're doing a great job of that, though,
No.
in terms of the ingredients.
They still got a long way to go.
Yeah. But all that to say is that a lot of these big kibble corporations and manufacturers, they don't really care a whole lot what's going into the food, unfortunately. And if you look at the ingredients of most kibble out there, whether you go to Target or Walmart or Costco, and you look at the ingredients on this dog kibble, most of it is just flavored grains with a little bit of meat. And getting back to your earlier point, most of them contain those vegetable oils.
Yep.
Which has no business belonging in a dog's diet.
Right. At no time in the evolution of dogs did they need sunflower oil.
Exactly.
Yep.
But when we were doing research for this, we kept on seeing something pop up, and that was AAFCO or AAFCO, and it's the Association of American Feed Control Officials. You want to briefly talk about that?
Yeah. So this is, if you start doing any sort of research on dog food or really any pet food, AAFCO will commonly pop up. It is important to know here that AAFCO is not a governing body. So when we look at the USDA or the FDA, those are governing bodies. They come out with rules. Companies have to comply with those rules. AAFCO sets no regulation. They do research about what is in dog food and what dogs and other animals should be eating. But if you see something on a dog food that says AAFCO approved, they don't have any sort of approval. That means simply a marketing stunt.
Interesting.
Yep. So that's AAFCO. That's important to know.
So they're doing research, and they're, I guess, giving this research to the dog food manufacturers and telling them, hey, maybe you should include this ingredient, or?
Yeah, it seems like they do research on what is in the current dog food.
Okay.
And effectively what dogs should be eating. Based on my understanding of AAFCO, I wouldn't say they're a good nor bad party in this. They do have some ties to the pet industry and pet food, so they work heavily with them. They can be influenced, but they didn't seem like bad actors to me.
Gotcha.
I would just say that it's important to take what they say with a grain of salt.
Got it.
Yep.
I did remember there were certain claims that are made on packages, and I think this is kind of Is this regulated by AAFCO?
Yes. So you will find that. So the FDA is actually working with AAFCO, and they developed some guidelines around what exactly is in pet food.
Yeah, and some of these shocked me as to what they are. So I'll give you a few examples here. If you look at pet food, or specifically dog food, and you see it says dinner or nuggets or formula, only 25% of that actually needs to be meat. And if you see something on the package that says made with real beef or made with real chicken or something like that, that chicken or beef only needs to be 3% of all the ingredients. So a very small percentage.
Shocking. 3%.
Yeah. And we're going to get into what dogs should be eating. And hint, it's more than 3% beef. And then if you see something that says, and this may be obvious to some people, but if you see something that just says beef flavor, then it doesn't need to contain any beef at all, or chicken flavor. It's just natural and artificial flavors, most likely.
Yep. Yeah, you'll find that a lot in like treats.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Beef flavor on treats.
Yeah, and it's probably just wheat flour, vegetable oils.
There's nothing in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Artificial flavors.
Shocking how little of it is actually real food. So you mentioned that it has beef. That 3% there, if it's made with beef, isn't even all that good beef. So what is actually coming into that food that is beef?
Well, this was another, I feel like I've used the word shocking already 5 times, but another shocking thing we discovered when we were researching this was that small percentage of beef, most of the time it's coming from a rendering plant where they use animal byproduct. So that's basically, they're just taking this meat and they're just processing it like crazy and forming it into kibble, dried food. But in 1990, there was one report that said one of these rendering plants had thousands of dead cats, dogs. There were heads and hooves from cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, whole skunks, all dead animals, rats, raccoons, and they were all just waiting to be processed, thrown into this rendering plant, and basically be processed into dog food.
Yeah.
Because these big kibble manufacturers were just looking to cut corners as much as they could. There weren't a whole lot of regulations in place. So they were just taking any dead animal they could find, process it like crazy, and eventually form it into kibble.
Yeah.
Which is disgusting.
Absolutely disgusting. Disgusting is the appropriate word. If you have not seen what an animal byproduct rendering plant looks like, then good that you shouldn't.
Yeah.
But if you're curious, go look it up, and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
What this looks like. You'll just see a bunch of dead animals going through a bunch of machines, and going from dead carcass to the little kibbles that you're thinking of for dog food. That's a very complicated process.
Yeah.
That's not preserving any of the nutrients that might even exist in that animal byproduct, if there is any.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, so just a horrible process there.
It doesn't even sound real.
No.
But unfortunately, it is. It's very real.
Very real. So there's some of this animal byproduct that's going into the dog food. What else is it that is going into dog food?
Yeah, a lot of it is the same food and ingredients that goes into our food, which is the 3 most heavily grown crops in the United States, which is corn, soybeans, and wheat. And you look at the ingredients of dog food, it contains those same 3 ingredients, which dogs don't need. And we keep hinting at it, but we're going to get into what dogs should eat, what an ancestral appropriate diet for dogs is. And then going off that, there's also a ton of preservatives that are in dog food. Some of them you may have heard of, like BHA or BHT. These are also in certain human foods. I know Cheez-Its contains one of these. But BHA has been shown to cause stomach tumors in rodent studies. And then BHT has also been shown to cause liver damage. So these are not good things that's preserving this dog food so it can last years and years and years.
Yeah. 25 years is what I've seen as like the standard shelf life for dog food.
Why?
Why would you need dog food for 25 years? And in order to get that, how many preservatives you have to put into that dog food to make it last that long is just a little bit terrifying.
Right. And just to go off that a little bit more, there's also, PFAs. We've talked about this on a podcast episode previously, but these are also found in a lot of dog food packaging, and recent tests showed that many dog food brands contain 6 times the amount of PFAs that's considered to be toxic. So just another thing that's ending up in our dog's food that, really shouldn't be there.
Yeah, a quick reminder, what are PFAs?
PFAs are, you may have heard them as forever chemicals, and these are things that are in, non-toxic or non-stick cookware. They're the coating on rain jackets. They're found in cosmetics and plastic and all these different things. And they're called forever chemicals because they accumulate in our body and we can't get rid of them. So it's very harmful. A lot of food companies are doing a good job of taking this out of their food packaging, but unfortunately, it seems like they're not doing a good job of getting it out of dog food packaging.
Yep. Hopefully that comes as a next step. More information on PFAs is getting out there is beneficial. But you may be thinking this is all crazy. Of course, there has to be some sort of like recall of this dog food if all this bad information or bad food is already in there. And you're right, there have been a lot of recalls over the years. There was one big one done in 2007, and it was actually from a company called Menu Foods, and they had a chemical that was found in their dog formula. It was actually 2 chemicals. It was melamine and cyanuric acid, and it was actually poisoning dogs, which was really sad. So thousands of pet food stores had to pull this food off of their shelves because it was immediately causing disease to these animals, which was really, really sad to see. And initially I was doing this, I was like, oh, okay, at least Menu Foods isn't around anymore. I haven't seen them. It turns out that they are. They produce 50 different dog foods in North America. They just label them differently.
And that was the other thing. We as we were doing research for this, we realized that it's really only, a handful of manufacturers or brands that control most of the dog food out there. Same thing with food. Yep. It's the same, 5-6 brands.
The same issue. Yeah. It's crazy. There's not much different as we look through this at its core to what we have, the issues we have in our own food and what issue we're seeing with dog food.
Yeah.
So you want to say something?
No.
Okay. So we've talked about when dog food was created. We've talked about the regulation or lack thereof of dog food in the current standards. So you have to be thinking to yourself, how did this happen? How did we get here? And Kyle, how is it that we got here?
So when Kibble was first introduced in 1926, we said, it was a little bit challenging at first to convince the American people that this basically fake dog food was healthier than just feeding your dog table scraps and, leftover real food that you were making. So what did they do? How did they convince the American people that this dog kibble was what you should be feeding your dog? And where did they go? They went to the vets.
Of course.
And they basically convinced the vets that this is what every single dog should be eating. So they taught these kids in vet school that, this is what you should be telling your when you start to work with clients. This is the food that you should recommend to your clients. This is what the dogs should be consuming, is this dog kibble, because it's nutritious, and that's where it all started.
That's exactly where it started. It's funny. We found that there are about 30 vet schools in the U.S. right now, and if you look at who funds those vet schools, you'll see just a bunch of big kibble companies. It was funny. We were just talking before. You were in the vet the other day, and you're looking around, and what are you seeing?
It's just all Purina everywhere, and it's like soy is the best source of protein for cats and dogs. And I'm just sitting there like shaking my head. Like, oh my gosh.
It's slow but surely mind control of some effect, where you want to convince the people that have influence that your dog food is good, and then if you go to the vet, you're going to look around and see all these colorful pictures of happy dogs.
Happy dogs, yeah.
And you see Purina and you're like, oh, I want my dog to be happy.
Yeah.
I'll give it these kibbles here.
It's the same thing with regular medical school. Like all of these big pharma corporations are funding, and big food corporations are funding medical school. And, that's the same thing. That's what these medical school students are taught.
Yep. It's the same exact playbook.
Yeah.
It's not surprising to see it in dog food, but it is sad because we can think for ourselves and we have control over our diet. Dogs and other pets rely on us.
Yeah.
And so it is on us to understand exactly what is going into their food.
Yeah. And all this to say, we're not saying that vets are bad or like this is just what they're taught. It's
Yes.
the same thing with regular doctors.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Not bad people.
No.
One documentary we watched actually compared the pet food industry to the cigarette industry in about the 1940s, where at that time, doctors were recommending cigarettes.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think looking back.
Yeah.
But we got more information and that changed. And so it's the same kind of thinking here where vets just don't know because it's what they've been taught.
Right.
One example here is that my wife and I, we have a dog named Cooper. And
Cooper.
Shout out Cooper. Cooper got heartworm. And so we were going through the treatment for heartworm and the vets were fantastic with this whole process. Unfortunately, one of the heartworms broke off and he went into anaphylactic shock. And it seemed like he wasn't going to make it within a matter of minutes. Rushed to the vet. They took care of him and they made him all better. And shout out the vets because they completely saved his life. No doubt about it. And this is one of those areas where both in our own medical system as well as in vets and pet systems, we are really good at solving acute problems. This was an acute issue. It was an anaphylactic reaction to a heartworm breaking off. What we struggle with, same in our industry, is the chronic conditions.
Yes. Yep.
If you look at diabetes for dogs, if you look at obesity in dogs, if you look at arthritis in dogs, those things are the areas that continue to go up because of nutrition.
And it's the same conditions that are prevalent in humans. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, it's because we're eating the same food. We're eating the processed corn, soy, and wheat. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I hope dogs aren't getting a lot of added sugar, but we are getting a lot of added sugar. And these vegetable oils, we're both getting a lot of vegetable oils. Look at treats. Look at your average dog food out there. They all contain these vegetable oils.
Yep,
So
exactly.
It doesn't surprise me, unfortunately.
Right. Not at all. One quote that I thought was powerful. This is from a vet. Her name is Dr. Barbara Royal. She said, the pet food industry is telling us what to feed our pets based on what they want to sell us more than what's good for the dog. So just really sad that that's kind of the state of where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that sounds like probably a lot of bad news to everyone, but we're going to get into the good here.
Yeah.
So what are dogs supposed to eat? So if you look at a lot of scientific studies that have been done, it shows that dogs and gray wolves share a very significant amount of their DNA, up to 99%. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking about this before. That 1% that they don't share is just the looks of them, I guess.
The appearance,
The appearance, yeah. So this high degree of similarity is due to the fact that dogs were domesticated from wolves. Mm-hmm. So they're essentially just a product of selective breeding from wild wolf populations over, thousands and thousands of years. Mm-hmm. So, okay, we have gray wolves. What diet do gray wolves have? And should dogs be consuming a similar diet? The answer is yes, they should be consuming a similar diet, and that diet should be high in protein, very, very high in protein, not 3% beef, but maybe 97% beef and other high-quality protein. So muscle meat, organ meats, and then even sometimes bones. Think about it. If a wolf is out in the wild and kills a deer, they're going to eat that entire animal. They're going to eat the muscle meat. They're going to eat the organs where a lot of the nutrients are, and they're even going to eat the bones. So our dogs should be consuming these same things, protein-rich diets. This supports their muscle development, their energy needs, and ultimately they're getting all the macro and micronutrients that they need from consuming all of those things. It should be relatively low in carbohydrates. The only carbohydrates that wild gray wolves would be eating are things like maybe sometimes berries or leafy greens that are, not poisonous. Yeah. But no corn, no soy, no wheat, not even rice or anything like that. Like there's no need. They don't need to be consuming that at all. And it's really as simple as that. Mm-hmm. A lot of meat and a little bit of carbohydrates, maybe some fruit and vegetables here and there.
Yeah. A lot of what's in the current dog food is what one doctor referred to as biologically unnecessary. Like it's just stuffer that's in there to make it seem better.
The cheapest things you can stuff in there, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's lacking in the areas that they need that high protein. And that's really what the current picture of Kibble is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the different types of dog food that exist, but with everything, there's bad, better, best. Not everything is perfect. Not everything is horrible. And so we're going to break it down now into our famous bad, better, best.
Of course. So the bad is going to be basically what we've been talking about this entire podcast episode, which is the kibble. It's the highly processed, dried or not dried kibble that you see in basically any store. So most kibble goes through an extrusion process where the company will take these ingredients, like we've been talking about, corn, lentils, rice, barley, or wheat flour, and it's heated to extremely high temperatures and high pressure, which essentially destroys a lot of the nutrients that are even there to begin with. And then they shape it and they cut it so it all looks the same, looks nice and pretty, and then it's dried and cooled. And then at the end of this drying and cooling process, it's normally sprayed with flavorings, artificial flavorings, maybe beef flavor, so the dog actually eats it, and then synthetic vitamins. So if you look at the end, similar to if you look at white bread for humans, it'll say enriched wheat flour. All of the vitamins and minerals are taken out in that processing, and at the end, they'll add in the synthetic vitamins. Same thing with dog food. If you look at the end of the ingredient list, it's all just synthetic vitamins. Not that this is bad, but it's much better to get your vitamins from unprocessed real whole food. So that's what they're doing at the end of this drying and cooling process. They're spraying it with flavorings and synthetic vitamins. And most of the time, this type of food will contain vegetable oils, like we talked about, ingredients that have no business belonging in dog food.
Yep. So that's the bad category. That is something that I read that you should avoid if you can, understanding that a lot of the dog food that we're about to talk about can be expensive. So even just limiting that kibble dog food that you're giving to your dogs can be beneficial. Understanding it can be expensive.
Right. Yeah. Totally understand that.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the better category here, which is going to be something like air dried or freeze dried. So these foods, it should say it on the front of the package. And unlike kibble, this doesn't go through a heating process, and a lot of the nutrients are actually preserved. They're not destroyed. So this is going to be much, much better. Now, again, make sure you look at the ingredients. Ideally, I think if it is air dried and freeze dried, these companies are already kind of making a step in the right direction. So most of the time they are using more real ingredients, but ideally I'd like to see, meat, some sort of meat, organs, maybe some crushed up bones in there, and then maybe some fruits and vegetables.
Okay. What we're looking for.
We don't really need the grains.
Yeah. The grains.
The dogs
corn,
don't need them.
Soy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Don't need them. Just like humans. We don't need them. They don't need them.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the better category. And this is kind of in the middle in terms of affordability. It's probably more expensive than kibble, obviously. But it's going to be cheaper than the best category, which is going to be raw or maybe gently cooked food. So this is going to be things like raw meat, raw organs, crushed up bones, and then raw fruits and vegetables. And there are companies that kind of package this into, packages so you can just dump it out. You're not buying all these things separately and making your dog a meal. A lot of these come prepackaged now.
Yeah, that's a good
it's more
point.
convenient. And I'll leave a list of all of my favorite brands in the description, both the air dried and freeze dried brands, and then also the raw or gently cooked brands. And when I say gently cooked, I just mean something like Farmer's Dog, which is probably what a lot of people are familiar with. That's gently cooked. They have chicken and turkey and beef. This isn't sponsored by them. Recipes. And the chicken and the vegetables and fruit that go into that, they're gently cooked to destroy any bacteria or pathogens that may be in there.
Yeah. When you mentioned the raw food, not necessarily a complaint, but something I hear a lot from vets is that, we're worried about the bacteria that could exist in raw food. Should we be worried about that?
For the most part, no. You should not be. So the pH of a dog's stomach is extremely, extremely acidic. It's a pH of 1 to 2. And this is going to basically instantly kill any bad bacteria that may be there. Think about it. Dogs eat random stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And most of the time they're fine. Mm-hmm. It's because that pH is so extremely acidic.
Yeah. Yeah, their stomachs can process a lot. Yeah. Whatever's outside, our dogs are always chewing on it. A stick or something. Finley, shout out Finley. He just eats sticks.
Your other dog.
Other dog, yeah.
He just eats them.
Yeah. So, yes, their stomachs are built to take a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I know one of the most common types of bacteria that people are concerned about is salmonella, which salmonella actually needs a pH of 4 to 10 to survive and then thrive. So nowhere near the pH of a dog's stomach. So you should be good there.
Yep. Yeah, so we mentioned too, table scraps have been vilified by a lot of the dog food companies so that they can use your dog food. But there are a few table scraps or really food that we as humans consume that dogs should not.
Yes.
What are those?
Oh, so those are going to be things like onions, garlic,
yep,
grapes,
avoid the grapes,
raisins, yeah, which come from grapes, macadamia nuts, and chocolate. I think those are the main ones there.
Okay, I remember we were kids, and I think we had a dog when we were growing up. Her name was Addie, and there was thing of brownies on the counter.
Yeah.
And I forgot, we must have been at school maybe or something.
Yeah, we were.
And Addie got the whole thing of brownies. Yeah. And she get rushed to the vet.
That was right when we got her, right?
Yeah, she was
really
puppy.
little.
Yeah. She was okay from that, but she got a whole thing of brownies. Not good.
I think they made her just throw it up.
Yeah, got it out.
Yeah.
Yes. So don't give your dogs everything.
Yeah.
And if you have any doubt, just Google it real quick. Look it up.
Yeah, and there are some good. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to say, Kyle, I can't afford the air dried or the freeze dried or the raw or gently cooked food. So one step in the right direction is going to find kibble that contains more of the real ingredients, maybe contains more beef, less vegetable oils, things like that. But then also you can add real food to your dog's kibble. So even things like real blueberries are great for dogs. Really high in antioxidants. There's so many different supplements out there, but there's like some dried beef organ supplements that you can kind of just sprinkle onto your food. If you can't afford the best food, like I just said, and you're still feeding them kibble, maybe just buy this supplement to just sprinkle it on their food. I know at Sprouts now there's raw kefir, which we've talked about previously, which is specifically meant for dogs and cats as a meal topper, because kefir is so nutrient dense, good source of protein and fat, but also it contains a lot of good bacteria for your dog's gut. So that could be also something you kind of just pour a little bit on top. But yeah, there's many other supplements that you can kind of just add to your dog's food to make it more nutritious and more ancestral appropriate.
Yep, exactly. I think that's the takeaway there.
Yeah, but I think that's going to be it for this episode. As I said, I will leave all of my favorite brands in the description and links to all of them. But that's going to be it for episode 21 of the Clean Kitchen Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you found this helpful, please share it with a friend that you think would benefit from this information, with a dog-loving friend. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to leave a review, subscribe on YouTube if you're not already subscribed, and we'll see you next week in episode 22.